guys from Nomad and Publicis up. And again, this is a fantastic. So Nick Steele from Nomad Foods, Ben West from Publicis Media. We wanted to end the conference with something, again, sort of a call to action about why this matters. And this matters not because, as lots of people, including the people who took so much of our attention from Facebook, perhaps why we're ending so late, about attention being useful in itself, but it's a means to an end. And so that's why we're so excited to finish today with these guys. Thanks very much.
Do you want to do the slides? Hello? Everybody hear me? That's good. So, hi everybody. So we're going to talk about Captain Birdseye and what we've done. Who likes fish fingers? Yay! Who likes frozen peas? Hey, who hasn't had a fish finger ever in their life? Look at that. Wow. Okay.
We're good.
So, I'm Nick. I'm the Growth Strategy, Insights and Analytics Director for Nomad Foods. I've been there ever since the conception of Nomad Foods, which was the coming together of Birdseye and Findus. So we're the market leaders of frozen foods around Europe. And that means we serve about 15 billion occasions a year, something like that. So it's a huge amount of food out there. And that's enough about me for the moment.
Hi everyone, I'm Ben. I work at Publicis Media. I've been there for 22 years, which is quite scary, and for the last couple of them working with Nick. So delighted to be the ship hand to the captain, I think. So, retention.
Next. Okay. Who's bored talking about COVID? Yeah, we're all bored about it. So we are going to talk a little bit about COVID. Because it had a huge impact on our business. But we've got some good learnings about why that happened. We had a lot more consumers come in, and I'll explain why. It's probably really obvious. And we'll talk about, actually, did we break some of those rules, how brands grow, what's really going on out there. So we'll talk a little bit about that and what we can learn for the future. So we all know this, right? Everybody knows how brands grow, everybody knows Bar and Sharp. Everybody knows about physical and mental availability. I've worked for a number of businesses, all of them who follow these principles. And I was going to ask Ben how many of his people he works with follow these principles too.
I mean, it's become ubiquitous now, and it's fascinating because, of course, in FMCG, but even one of our new acquisition clients, TikTok, you've probably seen them sponsoring the Euros recently. Even they recognizing the importance of gaining attention to drive penetration. So yeah, it's universal really now.
And actually, for me, they're very, very interchangeable. Availability, attention, is it the same thing? Mental availability. But when I think about that, and we're managing our brands, so Captain Birdseye, of course, he is the biggest brand asset we have, probably one of the biggest in the UK and across Europe, whether it be Captain Findus or Captain Igloo. But it's not just about that. When we talk about these things, we mean not just the media world, but also the memories that people have in their heads of eating fish fingers. If you go online and look at what people talk about, they talk about their experiences with food. And that's just as important and just as important to attention as is all the media bits. But it all has to work together. And that's why it's so important. So, I said that, and you know, that penetration and loyalty, well, they're two different things, and brand growth is driven by penetration. Now, I asked you at the beginning who hadn't eaten fish fingers. Does that mean the penetration of fish fingers is 100%? Probably does. Okay? So how do I work that? So if penetration and brand size are the same, then we've got 100% penetration. Does that mean we should be enormous? The real thing is about the time period we look at this. So for us, I'll explain this very briefly. We look at penetration in 3 monthly cycles, which is about the frequency people go on their main shop, right? So everybody goes, when you get to learn about shoppers, they go shopping about once every 3 months to do a proper big shop. So we measure penetration on that level. So buying 4 times a year for that's not loyalty. That's just penetration over every 12 months. And actually, we follow these rules of the leaky bucket. So our task is getting more people in the top than fall out the bottom because we're keeping the physical and mental availability high. And you might not be able to read that, but there's an R squared there, and this is actually data from Germany, just to prove that we don't just do things in the UK, of 0.96% between penetration and brand size, which is amazing for anything. Those of you who are in research, a correlation of above about 0.5 is very, very high, just goes to show how much this law works. So, what do you think about that, Ben?
No, I mean, I love it. I mean, it helps us in many ways. It makes our lives easier, focus on penetration, you know, media strategies are simplified. So, yeah, I'm all for it.
And makes my job really simple, because all we need to do is think about mental and physical availability or attention. I can go home, right? That's it, we're done. But hold on, wait. Then this happens, right? So I'm going to talk about COVID, but in a good way. So every cloud has a silver lining. And you'll see there, during COVID, people ate a lot more food in home, right? So hands up those who bought the 12-kilo bag of rice. I did. Did anybody want to admit me to that guy you saw on social media with a 50 toilet rolls and a shopping basket? You know what? We all did it. But actually, for us as a business, it was really important because it meant that people had more in-home occasions. So they needed to buy more food. So we got loads of new consumers in. And they experienced our food, and in fact, they spent more time on social media. They spent more time on their mobiles, which means that they were able to, and we were able to deliver more to them with more occasions. And these were really fantastic new discoveries. In fact, we gained almost 2 million shoppers, which is amazing just over the period of COVID. And the sales uplift during that time was phenomenal. Of course, we're seeing the opposite side of it now, but that's really important. And not only that, people bought more freezers too. So COVID did come some good things here, more frozen food, more shops, and actually we know people really love those experiences. So in a sense, our life's easy. But what has that got to do with physical and mental availability and attention? If I could just get people to buy a freezer, they fill it up, why not? I'm done, right? Not that simple.
No, and you know, I mean, we all know that these concepts, as Nick's shown, have been proven, but COVID changed the game, and I think this is one of the themes that we really want to explore in the remainder of this presentation, is that, you know, in the context of when things like COVID come along, you can't just sit back and accept the rules that you read in a book a few years ago. You need to react to them. And, you know, as Nick's just said, imagine this, a business gains 2 million shoppers. That's the kind of opportunity that you just can't ignore. So, you know, we've built our business on delivering attention to new category buyers, and we've done that overwhelmingly effectively through consistent levels of high reach in audio-visual formats. And that isn't going to change. But that balance is the thing that shifted a little bit for us when it came to COVID. With those 2 million new shoppers, we're in a situation where gaining the attention of new buyers didn't go away, but holding on to the attention of those people who had bought us for the first time suddenly became a really big growth opportunity. And we really had that opportunity to take, and that's what we did. And you know what? It was a kind of brave decision, because you've got a lot of this marketing theory coming at you, and is this the right thing to do? But in Q4 in particular last year, we did what I'd call a surgical strike. We redeployed some of our investment, we rebalanced it to target existing buyers. Those are people who bought us because of COVID in the last month or the last 3 months. And why did we do that? Not just because there were 2 million more of them out there, but by implication, they were cheaper and easier than ever to retain. And the way that we were doing that was through a combination of different data. So Nick, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of how you're doing this behaviourally? Because I think it's really important.
In very simple terms, we use lots of very traditional techniques. So we did things like looking at the household panel data, just counting the number of shoppers, who's there. It's very easy to discover who the people are, who are buying, who are not buying, who's new, and we can identify them. And not just about who they are from a behavioural point of view, but also demographically. I won't talk much about that because we know everybody eats fish fingers and peas, which is great. So it's very, very standard stuff. It's not new, but it's about using that data and that insight to help us do different things.
Yeah, I think Nick's being a bit modest there because I don't think everybody does this, but they should be. Reflecting on the shopper insight across the journey, translating as we did into tradable audiences with real precision on the likes of Facebook and Google. The other dimension of what Nomad does so well is they've invested for so many years with us in web analytics, SEO, other forms of content for the web to really enable us to understand who loves our brand, who's engaging with our brand, and create lookalikes. That was also a real key to how we were developing our retention strategy. And lastly, we were working with specialist data providers, so the likes of WeCosmos and Zeotap, those examples from Italy, but there's also likes of Carrefour, dunnhumby, to really profile even further. So it's these combination of data which was getting us under the skin and engaging with what is actually quite a difficult audience to reach. But we went a bit further, and this is where I want to talk a little bit about attention in another respect, which was we had all of these existing buyers we wanted to retain. But what we did was we actually conducted some primary research to just segment them a little bit. And what we found was that those really new buyers, the sort of people who bought Nomad for the first time in the last month, they tended to be a little bit younger. And they're so familiar with the brand that getting them to rebuy again, they're like in shopper mode. Yeah, it's just nudging them with simple stories. Whereas those what we call lapsed buyers, people who hadn't bought us for the last 3 months, we needed a little bit more inspiration. We needed to kind of capture their attention in a little bit more of a persuasive way. And that kind of dichotomy was really important because it played out in the messaging. So we had very, very single-minded, simple product comms with a straightforward benefit to the shopper mode attention. But then for the inspiration, that's where we're bringing to bear the value of recipes, the value of the meal occasion. You know what it's like getting over that midweek hump? What am I going to eat today? That was the kind of mindset. So that blend of messaging was really, really powerful. And that played out too in the way that we use different channels. So just an example on the likes of Facebook, simple shoppable formats for a level of shopper attention, whereas actually the continuity of kind of recipe messaging for inspiration, yeah? And you know what, yeah, we're a media agency, so we did smart optimizations with lots of kind of clicking and, you know, I'm not meant to be a clickhead, sorry, but, you know, engagement, reach, exposure. And that was super important because we didn't have all the money in the world. We want to rebalance this. Penetration's still important, so let's be efficient. The beauty of this was that we could expose people in the right number of times, but also we could cross-sell across the portfolio, yeah? Fish goes with peas, and why not try out a new meat-free range as well? So that combination of targeting, messaging, channel really paid back for us. And this is, I guess, the real proof of what we found, which was that actually investing in media to retain new buyers made a difference. We saw really strong correlations between those categories of our business that we supported, where we saw a real spike in the rate of retention. Retention goes up over time, but it really accelerated when we were active in media, in contrast to categories of the business where we didn't. And this is an example from Italy, but we saw exactly the same thing for fish fingers in the UK and in other markets. And we're actually doubling down on this. We're going to do some more analytics and really start to be able to set targets for this moving forward.
So, behavioural economics, and we talked a little bit about this today, shows that changing habits actually quite hard. But we saw this huge change of habit with COVID, so how do we deal with that? But what we do know is that people use system one, don't they, to make their choices. And we know that if you tried to shop on system two, it would take hours to do it because you'd have to think logically about everything you were buying. So we know that we managed to retain lots of these people, some great numbers there, and we know that's because of the system one experience they had. So we kept the mental availability high, they had a fantastic product experience, and this brought more people back in. And we retained almost half the buyers who came in, right? And you might think, well, hold on, Nick, that's not very good. Is it half? Actually, usually, for an average NPD for food and drink, about 25% of the people who bought you stay in your brand. So that's pretty good, right? We're almost doubling that. And that just shows the power of this approach of attention and physical and mental availability. So I thought I'd show you some results. But strangely, it looks like exactly the same slide as we had earlier, isn't it?
Hold on, I'm a bit worried. Have we made a mistake in the presentation? No.
No. Actually, it's not a mistake. It's exactly the same slide. And despite everything we've said, you will see that those correlations that I showed you folks were actually during COVID. So despite all of that, what we begin to see is that the importance of us to keeping the leaky bucket topped up and those laws of penetration and brand size remained during COVID, which is amazing. So how do we think about this? What does that mean? And one provocation I had was, actually, is Byron Sharp's theory just a result of what we've all been doing for the last 40 or 50 years? So if you think about it, the last 40 or 50 years, we primarily use TV, which everybody sees, and people can shop and buy these products, everybody can do it. So if you're in a situation where you're targeting everybody and everybody can buy everything, then it's logical that you'd see these effects happening. So let's take a step back and think more about actually what's happened in the past. And this is where my challenge comes, because I had a conversation with Ben about, well, Nick, can we talk about what happened in the 1940s? And you're like, I can ask my mum. So I did, and she was about 5, I think, or something at the time. And what happened, actually, if I think about how eating's evolved, as it turns out in the 1940s, the only thing that mattered was availability, because you had rationing. So you got what you got, and nothing else mattered. There was, you could argue that advertising or media would have no effect because you just got what you got. So right down here at the bottom, all about availability. As time goes on, I get more choices. I can choose what I like the taste of. As time goes on again, there's more convenience. So someone smart invented the microwave. We got bigger stores, supermarkets that everybody could go to. And you begin to see that over time, maybe, if you go back to the 40s, is Byron Sharp just looking at the consequence of evolution? And how will things change? I think the future of food and eating will be very different in the future. To start with, there's not enough space on the planet for us to make enough food for us all. But anyway, that's not what the conference is about today. But it takes it right back to the heart of what Birdseye was about originally. And Clarence Birdseye invented frozen food so it could be available to more people. So aren't we trying to do the same thing?
Well, I think here's the thing. A lot of people misunderstand Byron Sharp and think it's just about reach. It's about penetration. But what Nick's shown you is that when we think properly about penetration, and what we saw during COVID is it's really about these points of change. The best way to grow penetration isn't just to show up. It's not just a crude understanding of availability and saliency. It's about recognizing these points of change and being able to exploit them. And by implication, yeah, this old idea of just targeting in a kind of bullseye fashion, I think there's a better way. New buyers, existing buyers, the blur between them increases when you recognize this value of the points of change as the way to unlock penetration. And we've done a lot of research on this, and our provocation, if you like, is that, COVID is many things, but in a lot of respects, it's just another one of those life events. It's an opportunity during which consumers reappraised their choices. And whether you've had a baby, you move house, you retire, you go through those life stages, we've seen in research just how much that changes people's ability, their willingness to reappraise brands and to change. And we just think COVID is a bit like that, but it was just so big and so universal that we should recognize it reinforces the value of point of change as being the key for us. And this is it. If you go further into these concepts of mental availability and saliency, and you really reflect on the kind of real world, empathize with that, the way that people were shopping differently, the way that people were staying at home, the kind of crude concept doesn't apply. And as I think you saw from our case study, it's the how you do it, the different modes of attention that's becoming so important now. And when you look at the rise of amazing platforms like TikTok, it just reinforces this further point that we've got to understand probably better than ever before that balance but also the importance of how we show up. So connecting, for example, the messaging and the formats into the channels. Just showing up, reach, salience, aware, no. It's much more about recognizing the modes of attention, the context, and many of the themes that you've heard from other speakers today.
So what's this really taught us? So openly, we used to do our media planning, and we tried to, with our distribution, we tried to reach as many consumers as possible, with as many messages as possible, in as many touch points as possible. So whilst we don't dispute that, actually, you know what? I've got a picture of fish fingers and peas here, and there was a joke here, which is, I think we'll still be eating fish fingers and peas in 40 years' time, but we will sure as hell not be looking in media the same way. So there's something really important here. We need to look at people's behaviour, and COVID's taught us looking for those inflection points, looking for those change points is really important. It's not really just about what you're selling. It's much more about how you do it. And don't always rely on the past, as Bar and Sharp has done, to prove a point. Yes, it might be true, but it's much more important that we look to the future and try and understand when people are going to change those behaviours and target those, and think about how we can gain consumers those points of inflection, than we look back and just blandly apply mental and physical availability.
Yeah. I mean, I think, this crisis has just to emphasise, recognise these points of change, and the spike in penetration comes with the opportunity of retention, the rebalance, and now the opportunity, particularly in digital media, to shift away from general bullseye targeting to recognising different modes of attention. And fundamentally, what I would leave you with myself would be, don't see retention as wrong. That's what the theorists say. I think there's a new era now where the balance between penetration and retention needs to be put into sharper focus and make it an active choice, not just something to discount. We've seen it's driven a huge amount of sales and revenue for us, and moving forward, that's an area we're going to be pursuing, for the long term.
Thank you so much for this, and I think it's a really, really strong way to end what's been a really, really interesting day, because, and I think this is what's so interesting, because in a case study that was about fish fingers and peas and pancakes and things like that, you've got two really profound things there. One, I think, which is super, super important, which is a genuine empirical challenge to what is becoming a rather superficial orthodoxy about just go for penetration all the time. I think we are lucky to have you guys here, because the smart money for the last 10 or 15 years has been to say, don't think about retention.
Yeah.
But if you're being honest about it, you have to follow the data. And then I think the second thing that's really, really important here is sort of almost hidden away in that presentation, is that we have been talking once again about attention being the same all the time everywhere. And the guys here have made a really profound point again, which is different people look at things in different ways. So we've got lots of questions again, but I don't want to go to because we are now quite seriously late, and there is drink, and it's very hard to get people to attend to things. But I will ask just one question, just one thing here, which is, you were talking about two different media cultures, media society. All of us have grown up in essentially a TV-dominated culture, which says the way, as a marketer, the way you want to get out, there is only one big medium, which is telly, and therefore the way to use telly well is to talk to everyone, and that's essentially what's underpinned Dr. Sharp's work, which is obviously actually Dr. Ehrenberg's work, which is being repackaged. One of the things that you have been saying here is that media has changed. And COVID has also changed media. We're now watching Netflix rather than ITV. Do you see those big societal changes having further impacts once COVID has gone? Do you think the way the media culture has changed is going to change the way that you do your job and the way you brief him to do his job?
Yeah. Okay.
Fundamentally, it has to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it already has to. We're thinking much harder about how we do that. And I'd also say the collision between media and sales gets closer. So when we think about the e-commerce ecosystem, if I'm pushing media through a sales channel, is it sales or is it media? And so therefore we begin to think about things in a much more joined up way, in a total ecosystem way. And we are very much thinking about this as being a theme through this, the specific role of each media channel, so, which is critical. So we don't just think about mental availability, attention, boom, sales. Is absolutely, is this about driving sales at the point of purchase? Is it about driving awareness? Is it driving conversion? Absolutely the heart of what we're doing, and it will continue to do that and probably expand more in the future.
Yeah. I mean, I think from our point of view, this is the era of accountability now, and what we're seeing is actually increasing precision on the roles of each channel, and absolutely the ability increasingly for us to be able to scale out in ways that we couldn't before, turn taps on and off. So yeah, I mean, it's a very exciting time to be here, and absolutely something in which, the acceleration is just profound. I mean, you've seen it from the IPA touch points, you see it from all of our own research as well, but it's a generational thing, and actually the extent to which older generations are behaving like younger generations is just shocking. So yeah, good times to be here, and we're not looking back.